Is it back? Okay, very good. Very good. Hey, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Jumping on real quick just to give Dr. Russell Kennedy a minute to get here. Let me see if I can tag some people without messing this all up. No. Guest request. Okay, that's the doctor right there. Let me see. Guest request, viewers. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in while you're looking at this video. Hello, hello. This is Lisa Scott here. We're getting ready to have an intriguing discussion with Dr. Russell Kennedy about childhood trauma and its relationship to autoimmune diseases. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me see here. I see someone here. Ed. Here we go. Ed. Very good. It says adding Dr. Connecting.
Hey, how you doing,
Hey,
Lisa? Been a
I am
while?
wonderful. I know. How have you been?
Good, good. Keeping myself busy as usual.
Uh,
How
I
about
I
you?
see. I see. Me too. Me too. I'm so excited to be talking to you. And first of all, happy birthday.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was my birthday yesterday, and family had the cake and all that stuff. It was great. It's good.
Wonderful. It's like all kinds of great news happening with you right now. Birthday, you're a #1 best-selling author. I was so excited for you, Dr. Russell, like I wrote the book myself.
It's pretty cool, actually. Yeah, it's nice to get that validation, especially when you present a theory that's really atypical, that's not mainstream medicine or psychology. When you present a theory that's very different than that, to get that wide level of widespread acceptance. I mean, be #1 in psychiatry is another thing that's pretty amazing about that book.
Are you serious? #1 in psychiatry?
Amazon, like I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks back, it was #1 in psychiatry. Yeah.
That is I'm so excited. Look, I'm smiling from ear to ear because I'm just so excited. And the last time you and I talked, from that time and in between that time to witness, all of this happening is absolutely incredible. So I'm
Yeah, it's
just like,
pretty cool.
so let's just jump right into it. For everyone who is here, welcome to this discussion today. I am truly excited to be having this discussion with Dr. Russell Kennedy. We're going to be talking about childhood trauma and its relationship to autoimmune disease. And the first thing I want to do is read Dr. Russell Kennedy's bio. It is incredible. It says Dr. Russell Kennedy, aka the Anxiety MD. He specializes in the art and neuroscience of helping people recover from anxiety disorders. He knows anxiety from the inside out as he developed his own anxiety disorder as a result of growing up with a dad with severe schizophrenia. Dr. Kennedy has degrees and advanced training in medicine, neuroscience, and developmental psychology. But it's not all science, as he is also a certified yoga and meditation teacher and was a professional comedian for over a decade. No joke. I love that part. In his award-winning book and auto book Anxiety RX, he shows a practical, actionable program for anxiety relief that incorporates a combination of the latest in neuroscience with the grounding wisdom of the body, with the ultimate goal of relieving the anxious thoughts of the mind. Using neuroscience, think the body keeps the score, and blending that science with a more artistic approach he learned through living at a temple in India, taking psychedelics, and being a natural and gifted intuitive. Dr. Kennedy gives a unique and never before seen understanding of what anxiety truly is, and further, exactly how it can be successfully treated. Dr. Russ wants to make sure that nobody has to suffer with anxiety as he did. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And I am
Wow,
truly
you read the long bio, Lisa.
I did. That was the one I was drawn to, so I had to
Okay,
read. So,
sure.
may I start with why I was so interested in having this conversation with you? Just so you're aware, I was diagnosed myself some time ago with arthritis. And for myself, instead of just, owning that, oh, okay, I've been diagnosed with this, this whatever it is, I get curious about these things and I want to understand the root, the subconscious root behind how something like this could have occurred. So for me, it always goes back to subconscious messaging and childhood trauma and things of this nature. So this is why this topic intrigued me and caused me to want to reach out and talk to you about it. I want to ask my first question to you, Dr. Kennedy, is can you explain to us what trauma is? And the reason I'm asking that question is because you know how language in its limitation, it's pointing to something. However, people can perceive something to be a particular thing and not have it encompass all that could include. And what
Sure.
I'm thinking about this is that word childhood trauma could cause people to believe that everything has to be, some quote unquote major, event. And yes, it includes that. But I wanted to get your perspective on, your thoughts about what childhood trauma actually is.
Well, really, it's anything that overwhelms your nervous system.
Hmm.
So, and some people are born more sensitive than others. So you can get someone who's born not very sensitive and they can take, a considerable amount of trauma in their life. But you can take someone who's born really sensitive, they really can't take that much. So anything that overwhelms their nervous system or their ability to cope kind of spills over and on some level gets stored in the body. And eventually that can show up as disease, mental and physical. So, trauma is really anything that overwhelms your nervous system. So,
Hmm.
we can go through, traumas every day. We get a letter asking for $1,000 in the mail. That's a trauma on some level because now for me that would be not the greatest thing in the world, but it would be an incredible hardship. Whereas somebody who had very little money, $1,000 would be a huge trauma for them. So it's all subjective, really. You really have to look at the person. You have to look at their background. Have to look at the level of sensitivity that they just naturally have, and anything that overwhelms their nervous system and can't be kind of calmed in the moment or in the next 3 to 5 minutes is probably a form of trauma.
Okay, and I'm so glad that you're saying that because I'm thinking about a time because this was in grade school sometime, and I had gotten my first D. This was the most traumatic thing I had ever experienced because
Sure.
I was the AB, at worst C student. So to get a D was traumatic. And this is why I want to talk about this because, so many people could be not understanding that terminology and like I said believing that it's one thing when I love how you explained your body simply wasn't prepared for whatever it is that you had as an experience, and this is what is trauma inside of the body. So thank you for that clarification. And so the next thing I wanted to know is what is autoimmune disease? What exactly is that in general?
Well, it's when your own immune system acts against your own cells. I mean, what typically happens is that the immune system is designed to recognize anything that is not you, that is not your cells. So anything that is not you, it defines as foreign, and then it attacks it with antibodies, with T killer cells, with all sorts of, immune armamentarium, because it recognizes that that cell or that invader or that bacteria or that virus is not you. So anything that is not you, it by definition attacks. But what happens in autoimmune disease is it stops being able to recognize what is you and what is not you. So in arthritis, it starts attacking the cartilage. It starts, chipping away at the cartilage. And that causes arthritis. That causes it, or thyroid. It sort of recognizes that your thyroid is not yours, and it sort of starts making antibodies or cells that go against your thyroid and cause thyroid issues. It can do it to virtually any tissue in the body, but it's basically kind of a mismatch. The immune system fails to recognize what is you and not you, and starts attacking you, and that's what autoimmune basically really means.
Okay. And what are some, because as I was looking this up to have a better understanding myself of what autoimmune disease is, I saw a statistic that said that something like 90% of at least Americans are unaware of the fact that perhaps they were diagnosed with something, but they don't know that that is an autoimmune disease. So can you just give some examples of certain diagnoses that are considered autoimmune diseases?
Yeah, rheumatoid arthritis, myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, lupus would be another one, thyroiditis would be another one, kidney issues, glomerulonephritis, which is a very, multi-syllable name for kidney disease. It can pretty much attack any sort of organ in your system. Myositis, inflammation of the muscles. It can really attack anything. Your body is very well designed to attack anything that it perceives as not you. So it can attack pretty much any cell in the system. Uveitis, it can attack the eye. Otitis, it can affect the ear and cause, vertigo and difficulty hearing and all that kind of thing. It can virtually attack any system in the body. And a lot of times when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, we don't know what it is, many times it's probably some form of autoimmune disease.
Hmm. Hmm. And in your experience, what has been some of the most commonly diagnosed autoimmune diseases that you were dealing with when
Yeah.
practicing?
Thyroiditis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. And had you noticed what the connection between these autoimmune diseases and what was going on in that person's history, what type of trauma that they may have experienced in order to cause, ultimately, and what is that connection? How would you make that connection between someone experiencing
Yeah.
a trauma and holding on to whatever that communication and messaging neurologically happening in the body? What is that connection between what they're experiencing on a subconscious level and ultimately manifesting something physically?
Well, that's a
So,
big question. We don't really know a lot of the mechanisms that involve childhood trauma. One of them is through pro-inflammatory cytokines, which are kind of like these cells in the body, these that act to promote inflammation. And it's been seen in mental disorders and physical disorders with people with trauma in childhood that they have a higher level of these pro-inflammatory cytokines, which, by the way, are the same molecules that affect COVID. That's the reason why people, after 5 days, go into this florid phase of autoimmune reaction. It's a hyper reaction of the immune system that affects the entire body. So we have childhood trauma has been shown to increase these levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines, which over the course of time can start promoting inflammation. And once the inflammation starts, the body creates even more reaction to it. So it just creates this cascade of inflammation, which of course, kind of causes problems in the body for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh my goodness. That's leading me to talk about the experience that I had or have been in the process of having prior to reading your book. I want to share with you the experience that I started to have when I started to listen to your book, and the difference between, because if you recall at all, and knowing me and my story was that some years ago, I had a experience in my basement where I was, sick and tired of the different things that was going on with me in terms of symptoms. And I had a space carved out in time where I heard, with these thoughts that have brought you to this space, I'm going to show you how to use these thoughts to get yourself out. And so that had been my focus, was thought, and understanding that the correlation between thought and there being a emotional correlation of, you have a thought, an emotion correlating with that thought. That whole interaction was something I was completely unaware of prior to that day. And so my perspective was coming from thought. Thought first. These things aren't linear regardless of what we're thinking they are, but in my mind, my perspective was thought first leading to emotion, this type of thing.
Right.
As I was listening to your book, Doctor, and you talked about the ABCs, and I want you to go into that, but you talked about the ABCs. But what stuck out to me was when you talked about the space in between, the space in between having an alarm in your body, stopping, recognizing where the alarm is, not trying to do anything about it, not judging it, not trying to move it out, not doing anything, but witnessing the fact that this emotion would go to look for a thought, and having that understanding, being able to arrest that process in connecting emotion and thought. And so when you said that, I began to work that process immediately. It made so much sense to me. And I began to work that process immediately. And as I was, experiencing an alarm, witness, not allowing the connection, and having this happen over and over again consistently, I began to go into a space of no longer having excessive thought, no longer having a bunch of excessive thought. And it was so jarring, Doctor. It was jarring because it was silent. And it was to the point where I thought I needed to call my thoughts back, because I was like, wait a minute, like I wasn't used to this level of silence, this level of calm. But then when I realized, first of all, you're still here, Lisa. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. I began to work the process again, and I have been in such a present tense state. I have been in the now in such a present state that it has caused me to go from desire and want, wanting something, desiring something, to not wanting a thing, to being in the present moment, understanding the completeness of the present moment, and not desiring a thing. And I said, I have to talk to you about this because, you know, it just, I'll stop right there. I'll stop right there and get your thoughts on, you know, everything I have shared
Yeah,
so
I
far.
mean, well, yeah, a lot of anxiety is just overthinking, right? It's the ego in us that wants to protect us. So it protects us by warnings, what ifs, worst case scenarios that it believes is keeping us safe. So if you grew up in an environment where there's chaos, say your parent was an alcoholic, or your parent was mentally ill, or your parent was addicted, you never really knew what you were going to get at home. So there was an element of chaos there. So you would constantly worry and and make up stories about how you're going to protect yourself, which is basically worry. And that becomes a sense of, I don't know, it gives you a sense of security in a way because it's familiar. Because when you think and ruminate and that kind of thing, and the thing you ruminate on and think about doesn't happen, you make the unconscious assumption that because I worried, things didn't happen. Now, of course, your conscious mind knows that's not true, but in your child mind, makes perfect sense. So you kind of teach yourself to worry over the course of time. And what I'm saying in the book is that what happens when we get exposed to childhood trauma and wounding is we get this energy of alarm that's in our body. And the mind, which is a meaning-making, compulsive, make-sense machine, reads your internal and external environment all the time. So when it reads your internal environment, it reads that alarm, that frightening feeling. It's got to make sense of that. So it makes sense of that frightening feeling by creating a frightening worry or a frightening story, which of course we believe because we made it up. And that of course makes the alarm energy more activated, which of course makes the worries worse. So you get into this loop that I call the alarm anxiety cycle. So I believe that our worries aren't the fundamental cause of anxiety. Our worries are the effect of this old alarm, typically from childhood, that's still stored in us, that's still firing up our brain, that's still making our brain think these negative thoughts. So if you can separate that sense of alarm in your body from the thoughts of your mind, you can start breaking that cycle. When you can break that cycle, then you start feeling like you have some control over the anxiety that's basically, held you hostage for many, many years. So you have you basically break the spell of anxiety. You know how to break it. Now, whether or not you can continue on and do that and just focus on the sensation in your body and kind of let the thoughts of the mind go, that's another story. That takes a lot of practice. But at least you know how to break the cycle. And all these modalities I see of treatment where they try and talk you out of the thoughts, or they try and, make you realize that your thoughts aren't real or accurate or whatever, I find is sort of a distraction, because the thoughts aren't the problem. The thoughts are the effect. They're not the cause. But because the thoughts are so easy for us to pinpoint and see, we assume that they're the cause. So if you have a worry about something, oh my God, I hope my child is safe at school today or whatever, that's a thought in your mind that has been generated by a feeling of alarm in your body first. So if you can see it, if you can see by seeing that, by separating out the alarm, like going into your body and soothing your body, basically the engine, the fuel for the worries gets taken away. So the worries just fade away, which is, I think, what you're describing to me is like, once you start feeling the alarm and seeing that, A, it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be, and that you can handle it, and that you can comfort yourself on some level, then you start feeling like you have some control, and the thoughts don't need to protect you anymore. So
Yeah.
they just sort of fade away.
Wow. I'm telling you, I was like, what is happening? Well, like it was amazing, because you know how you don't know something is happening sometimes until it's not. So I
Yeah,
didn't
that's true.
realize how incessant the thoughts were until they just were not there. Then I was like, wait a minute, come on back, and
Yeah.
then in understanding that I could pick up thought and put it down, and I said, oh, so this is just another tool. It's not something we have to do.
Yeah.
Like and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. We don't have to do this, but who is,
Yeah.
understanding of we don't have to do this, except if you're engaging,
Right.
just like I said, in having the experience. You must have the experience, or else, you're going to keep functioning the way you do. But
Yeah.
I wanted to stop for a minute and what you were talking about in terms of, understanding that you don't need the thought, and that it's not the thought that's causing the alarm or what's happening. It reminds me of the brain balancing work that I'm doing now. The fact that we don't have to have these long drawn out conversations, it's like, what's the new belief? The person has an opportunity to have that space and time, to go from, whatever the thoughts were, they can feel the calming and they actually hear and witness the stories that are happening. And without doing anything about it, it just goes right, from that story right into the new belief. There's no long drawn out process about this. There's only, here's where you were,
Right.
and here's where you are now. And we can do some muscle testing to prove that your subconscious accepted the new belief. So that's, you just reminded me that that's the process. But I wanted to go a little bit deeper in terms of alarm, because when I was talking to someone about this, because they had not read the book, how would you describe some alarms that perhaps, just like the word childhood trauma, when you hear certain words, you could start believing or associating, oh, that means pain, that means physical pain, or something like that. For me, it was every single ping, pang, I don't care what it was. It wasn't a pain necessarily, but if I felt an energy in motion in my body, and I witnessed that energy in motion, I stopped right there. And I sat with it, and then it would dissipate. So could you explain your idea and just some examples of what various alarms could be, for people, just so they have a better idea?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times what I do with people is get them to bring to mind one of the traumas of their childhood. Not the worst trauma they've ever had, but something that still troubles them. And then I get them to scan their body from kind of like the chin to the pubic bone, usually kind of in the midline, and just see if there's an energy there that they can perceive that's a little more intense than the rest of their body. Sometimes it feels like a breakup, like a heartache, but and I one woman described it's like, yeah, it's kind of like a heartache in my throat instead of my heart. So it's really interesting how this energy kind of lodges in your body. And so scan your body and see where you feel it. Some people feel it in their belly. Some people feel it in their solar plexus. Some people feel it in their heart. Some people feel it in their throat. Other people feel it in their face or the elbows or the knees or whatever. But typically it's kind of in the midline somewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
typically it's kind of chest, abdomen area, chest, throat, abdomen. And then just see if you can find an energy that kind of lights up. And then I'll usually go into it like, what size is it? Is it the size of a fist, or is it the size of a cantaloupe? Does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it have is it the texture of it? Is it like, porous like cotton candy, or is it dense like, coal? That kind of stuff, like describing it and just finding it in your body. And then once you find that sensitive alarm, just, put your hand over it when you're getting stressed, like really, because I do believe that that alarm is a remnant left over from your younger self.
Mm-hmm.
The amygdala, the so-called fear center of the brain, which I don't like that term, but it's semi-accurate, basically remembers everything that's ever hurt you, and it records everything that's ever hurt you as well. And it also records it in the unconscious mind as well as the conscious mind, especially if it's intense. So if it's really intense and it's traumatic and you can't really process it as a child, the amygdala will process it and it will put it into your unconscious. And because the body is the representation of the unconscious mind, which is basically almost the title of what you're talking about today, the autoimmune disease that shows up in our body is basically from the trauma a lot of times in our childhood. And the Adverse Childhood Events Study in 1997 showed that very clearly with people in Washington State. There were 17,000 people, and they were all fairly, they had jobs, did well, economically, because they had to be in this, they had to be employed to be in this study, it was done by Kaiser Permanente, and they just took a sample of how many people had these types of childhood traumas. And the correlation trauma strong that they really saw that childhood wounding definitely caused mental and physical disease in people as they got older. So, and we're studying that more all the time. Like, Why is that? And we're starting to see these pro-inflammatory cytokines. We're starting to see the actual molecular medical reason for why this is happening, as opposed to just like a spiritual kind of thing. We're seeing medical reasons for why this happens. So, what do you do about that? Well, you find that alarm in your body, because I do believe that the amygdala never forgets, and it has no sense of time. So when you go through a trauma, I believe part of you stays stuck in that trauma for the rest of your life, unless you bring it to the surface. And I think, looking in the body and finding that sense of alarm is a way of connecting with your younger self that was traumatized. So if you find it, say, in your solar plexus, like that's where mine is, I put my hand over it, I put my other hand on top of my first hand, and I just really focus on the connection of my sensation, even though it's uncomfortable. And I just sit with it, and I just allow it to be there, and I welcome it. And on some level, you can really, once you get good at it, you can really talk to your younger self through that, really soothe them and show them that they are safe now, that they're not, because like I said, the amygdala has no sense of time. So if you go through a divorce of your parents when you're 7, and then you're going through your own divorce, part of you will turn into that 7-year-old who experienced the divorce of their parents. So it's able to, can you contact that 7-year-old? And I believe you can do that if you find them in your body, if you find that energy in your body. And I was trained as a medical doctor and a neuroscientist, so this to me is very ethereal, and it's something that came to me when I was on LSD. So it's just not something I would have ever come across academically. It was something I came across because I had to deal with my own anxiety. So that's got a lot to do with it, is realizing there is this energy of alarm in your body, and if you don't make friends with it, it's going to cause disease, mental and physical, in your body and mind as you get older.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, what I had noticed, and I would keep brushing it off because I didn't know what it was, but it was this subtle energy that just felt very uncomfortable, but it was always present.
Hmm.
And, it- I guess because it was so many years that it was there, I just was used to it. But then
Yeah.
it started to become, I guess, louder, for lack of a better way of saying it, understanding that this was there. And I started to allow myself to say it was uncomfortable. Before it was like, okay, it's uncomfortable, push it to the side. But it would reside right here in my chest area, and it was very uncomfortable. And I called it like a kind of a home base. If I was feeling better or worse, I could feel better or worse, but this, subtle energy, whatever it was always present. And I said, oh, this is no, uncomfortable is not okay, but for so long I had not recognized it or allowed myself to say that it was uncomfortable. So I completely understand everything you're saying. And it reminds me of the conversation we had the last time we interviewed, where I was telling you about um, my conversation with my younger self, that had happened. And I feel like that door of having that conversation with my younger self and being able to provide her with what she needed at that space and time, it opened the door for so many other understandings of just what you said, the ability to find our younger self within, where does this uncomfortable feeling or this alarm reside in your body, and knowing that nothing's going to happen to you, that the experience that you did have is not happening right now. All of that is taking place in the space of just sitting and just allowing. And so I would like for you to go into, if you don't mind, the ABCs that you talk about. Once you witness the alarm or recognize the alarm in your body, and you say to utilize the ABCs in order to assist yourself with that alarm, what exactly are those ABCs?
Yeah, well, it stands for awareness, body and breath, and compassion. So basically awareness, like what kind of things do you say to yourself over and over and over? Like we all have our frequent, flyers, our three top hits of negative things that we say to ourselves. Can you become aware of those things and realize that when you are saying those things to yourself over and over, it's because your alarm is activated. So once you see that, once you become aware that these are the things, this is how I feel when I feel alarmed. This is the things that I say to myself when I'm alarmed. When you get really good at figuring those out and seeing them as they're happening, then you can go into B. So that's awareness. The first one is awareness of what your common triggers or tells are. The second one is B, go into your body, into your breath. So get out of your head altogether. You're not going to solve the problem, the thoughts of the mind with more thoughts. They're just not going to do it. Although your ego will tell you that if you think more, you'll solve it, but it never works. So the only way of really solving it is getting out of your mind and into your body. So put your hand on your chest, feel into your breath, get into sensation, put your hands on your thighs, rub your thighs back and forth, rub your temples, get into some sort of sensation of the body, because sensation brings you into the present moment. And in the present moment, you can actually do something about something. Whereas if you're stressed out and if you're stuck in some past trauma or stuck in some future projection or worry, there's no platform for you to change at that point, because you're in the air. You're not even present. So sensation of your body brings you into the present moment, and it also takes you out of the head. And then the energy that you devote into feeling the sensation in your body is now energy that has been taken away from fueling the thoughts of the mind. So now you've created a positive cycle as opposed to a negative cycle. And then once you get into that grounded state, find that alarm, have compassion for that, younger self, inner child, whatever you want to call it. Find them and soothe them, because they're the ones that are yelling and screaming. They're the ones that are causing the problem. So if you can find them and soothe them, that's the root of the problem. And if you do that over and over and over again, you'll start noticing that you don't have the same alarming thoughts anymore. Or if you have the thoughts, you don't give them the same amount of credibility. You don't pay attention to them anymore, because your body hasn't resonated with those thoughts anymore, because your body is resonating with your true self, with your true innocent self. And then when you do that, then those thoughts appear, completely inaccurate. They
Yeah.
don't appear like they have. Whereas when you're in alarm and you think an alarming thought, it's completely congruent with how you feel, so you believe it. You believe that you're going to run out of money. You believe that your career is horrible. You believe that your relationship is going to dissolve. You believe all those things. And then later on, when you're kind of washing the dishes and looking at your family and feeling pretty good, it's like, how could I think that? Like, that was only like 4 or 5 hours ago. How was I so convinced that this is just the worst place for me, when clearly it's the best place for me? Because your mind responds to the alarm in your system. And the alarm in your system creates, like you said, mental and physical illness. And that's what happens with autoimmune disease, is that we have trauma that's unresolved. We haven't connected back with our younger selves. And then that is the messenger. Illness is often the messenger that we haven't connected with our younger self. So when you connect with your younger self, there's no need to create those pro-inflammatory cytokines anymore. There's no need to create all those negative thoughts anymore, because you're going at the source of the problem, which is this fundamental disconnection you have from the younger version of yourself.
Oh, yes, because a couple of things. The joint pain that I was experiencing, doctor, if I get it at all, I have more days now that I am completely comfortable all day long, having, going into the body and recognizing the alarm. And if I do experience any pain, it's more brief than it's ever been. So these are the physical, manifestations of this process. And also with being present in the body and not allowing recognizing that space in between, not allowing the connection between thought and emotion, it has stripped so many, as you were saying, I'm just saying it a little differently, coming from a different door. It has stripped so many self-identities, identities that were connected to those stories don't exist. So certain reactions and responses that I may have had, because if you say this, that might have, oh, that might have hurt, that type of thing. And
Yeah.
I recognize the alarm in my body, and I say, oh, okay, wait a minute. I don't have to, it doesn't have to go this way. And I have the opportunity of recognizing that space in between, go to the alarm, go through the ABCs. And the next thing you know, the alarm is gone, and I didn't need to do anything. And then that whole experience and scenario shifts on its own. So I'm just sitting back like, this is amazing. I mean, it's so amazing because I guess it's that connection to the ego and self-identity and all of that, that just like you said, keeps us in this cycle of believing, once we hear these thoughts and these things that we're talking about, including want and desire, doctor. Because I said, what the heck am I doing now? I'm like a manifest coach. I talk about manifesting. I talk about bringing things into reality. And now I'm in a space where I could care less about bringing anything into reality because in the present tense moment, it is complete. There is no want or desire in the present tense moment. So I'm like, that daggone doctor can't be like,
you're off the grid. You're off the grid. The government doesn't want that. They want people that want to buy stuff to make themselves feel better.
Exactly.
They want us to want.
They want to, you're supposed to teach me how to fulfill my desire and my this and my that, because I know that part of why this did happen for me also, this bridge of incidents that ultimately would have you in my space and all of these things, is because I got sick and tired of wanting desire. And I got sick and tired of it because no sooner than I wanted something and I got it, or no sooner than I desired something and I got it, I wanted something else and I desired something else. So the whole cycle of want and desire got on my nerves. It was to the point where I'm like, look, this is not working for me anymore. And there you go. Here comes a door opening that you have no clue. I mean, your book was called Anxiety RX. I didn't know I was going to experience coming into the present tense moment by reading Anxiety RX, but
I mean, a lot of people say to me, it's like, I don't even know I had anxiety until I read your book. So it's kind of funny, it's how that works. But really, I mean, the book ostensibly is about anxiety, but really it's about childhood trauma and really connecting with yourself. I'm telling my story. I tell the story of a bunch of my patients who, basically when you're separated from yourself, you look for things external to you in the belief that they're going to fulfill you. And what happens is it's this addictive kind of cycle, in that you get this external validation, and it feels really good to be validated externally. I remember I did stand-up for 15 years, and it felt great to go out in the audience and just destroy. But the next morning you'd wake up with this hollow feeling, like it wasn't anything that was going to last. And then you get into this following this sort of desire cycle of, it's like, okay, well, I want that again. I want to do that again. And you're really chasing the wrong thing. I mean, really, what you want is this kind of comfortable ability to give and receive love. That's really what we want, all of us. But what we've been shown is that, we're not enough the way we are, so we need to desire things. And there's nothing wrong with desiring things, nice things to have, comfort. There isn't. But if it becomes an addiction, if it becomes kind of like our singular purpose, which is kind of what it's been like in North America for the last 20 years. It's like, I want this, I'll get credit, I'll get the 80-inch TV, and I'll pay, $80 a month for the next 5 years to pay for it. We get, and then once we have it, we acclimatize to it, and we go, now I got to pay for this. Now I've got to pay for it. So it is one of those things, is recognizing, getting outside of the matrix, seeing that desire to want is in us. I mean, it's basically chemically wired in us to want to want. There's a great book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. And in that, he talks about the child looking at his presents under the tree at Christmas. And that child gets a bigger hit from dopamine looking at his presents, anticipating opening them, than he actually does opening them on Christmas Day. So we are a species that wants to want. And there's nothing wrong with wanting as long as you're doing it from a place of balance. And you know, as you're describing to me, it's like, this is a want. There's a difference between a want and a need. You know, a need is I need to have this, which is an old kind of addictive brain way of doing it, rather than I would like this. This would be a nice thing in my life, but if I don't get it, I have all these other wonderful things in my life. You know, so I think it's a way of looking at things so that we're breaking the spell of compulsively wanting, believing something external is going to validate us. And again, there's nothing wrong with external validation, but in this society, especially in social media, and we're obsessed with getting everything from the outside and not really giving ourselves much from the inside. And when we do that, we create more alarm in our system, because that child in us is going, hey, what about me? Yeah, it felt great to get that adulation for, 10 or 15 minutes. But what about me, the rest of the 23 hours and 45 minutes of the day? I have to get that from inside. And we're so indoctrinated to believe that something external to us is going to validate us all the time, that we get into this thing of wanting to want to want to want, and then that's a never-ending cycle, as you've seen.
And I found that in the practice of this also is that I've been desiring more to go into meditation, so that I'm, going into that space of, all the external communication dropping away and spending that time in as much of nothing as possible. And
I mean, nothing is really, Lisa, nothing is that sense of nothing. It's really a connection to yourself. I mean, I remember when I was living in a temple in India, and I experienced, enlightenment for about 90 minutes at 4 a.m. one morning, watching the sun come up. And it was like, this is a feeling of just complete and utter connection to myself. I didn't want anything. I was happy with where I was. I was happy with what I'd achieved. I didn't really want anything in the future. I was just really present at that moment, and I wanted to stay in that state. But again, life is flux. We have to move in and out of that too. So when that state about 90 minutes later started to fade away, there was a real sense of clinging and longing, and I wanted to hold on to it. And it was only later that I realized that it was a gift that I was given to have it for the time that I did, and not to chase it. That's the other thing. Don't chase that feeling. Just practice it. Just practice connection every day, and that becomes your manifestation. It's just when you're connected to yourself, you can have things, and ironically, you enjoy things more when you're connected to yourself.
That's where I'm at. I can just sit in my bedroom, and, my family is my, immediate experience of coming out of of that present tense moment in the interactions. But I'm so in a space of it reminds me of, because I have a gratitude app on my phone, and I said, wow, this is very interesting that I would sit down and write down the first thing that I'm grateful for, and the gratitude would beget more gratitude and more gratitude. And I would begin to understand, wow, something that I never before would have recognized as something to be grateful for, because in the egoic mind, it would have seemed so small. But in this space, it is huge. It's huge. And the gratitude begetting more gratitude would cause me to go into a present tense zone as well. And I'm like, wow. And so I would go off to sleep, because I like to do it right before going to sleep. So I would go off to sleep in that space, wake up in that space. And so I said, oh, wow, this is just like you're saying, doctor, just the fact that I am in a place where I just as you said, I understand want and desire. It's not, yes, that's fine. It's a wonderful thing. But to know that I don't have to do that either, and I can pick that up and put down as much as being able to pick up and put down thought just has me in such a space of gratitude. And I want to thank you because your book, and I highly recommend it. There's a number of people here. I have Mary Josephine here. She's saying, I'm feeling this. And I think she said before she had never thought about something, whatever we were talking about at that moment. She said she had not thought about it in that way before. There's a Maria, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. She is here. Michelle Elliott is here. A gentleman named Floss, who is a friend on my Facebook page. All of these friends, of course, on my Facebook page. But I thank them all for being here, and I know that you're enjoying this conversation, you know, hearing this conversation and topic of childhood trauma and its to autoimmune disease, and hearing about the my experience in particular and what Doctor is talking about in terms of his book, Anxiety RX, which I highly, the minute I started listening, oh yes, thank you. I highly, I cannot recommend enough this book, Anxiety RX. Thank you for putting that up in the screen. Doctor.
And it's on audiobook too.
Yes, that was my, that's my heart. Audiobooks are my thing. So I put the earbuds on.
Did you like the jokes I put in there, Lisa?
I cracked up. I loved it. It was, listen, I must sound like a, what do you call a billboard or whatever for the book, because every time I talk.
Commercial, yeah, I should put you on my website.
You should.
Lisa Scott, I'll tell you about the book. There you go.
You should.
Yeah,
you should.
Yeah.
Because I highly enjoyed the book. I felt like it was not just I felt like it was paradigm shifting for me. And the fact that I have been able to utilize the practice of the ABCs has just shifted my reality. I mean, I don't know what else to say. That's what it has done. And so I highly recommend the book for anyone, just like you were saying, some people bought the book, they didn't even know they had anxiety.
Exactly. But if you had, if you had childhood trauma or childhood wounding, or you grew up with a parent who was addicted or mentally or physically ill or abusive or whatever, like basically it covers all that stuff. With me, that negativity, that energy showed up as anxiety. And some people will show up as OCD, eating disorders, depression. It shows up differently in different people. And it's really important that the book ostensibly is about anxiety, but it's really about finding out why your brain works the way it does to make you worse instead of making you better, and changing that paradigm so that you kind of go, okay, instead of doing the wrong thing unconsciously, I'm going to start consciously doing the right thing, which is really connecting with myself. And that's really kind of what it comes down to. And it's, as a medical doctor, it's pretty atypical in its scope, because usually, we try and break things down into things that we can treat with pharmaceuticals. And you can treat anxiety with pharmaceuticals, but you're not really getting at the underlying cause, which is at its core, a disconnection from your younger self. And that younger self that was, confused, abandoned, abused, whatever, finding that connection back to them is what heals your anxiety, your OCD, your eating disorders, all that kind of stuff. So that's why I wrote the book, is like, because I wasn't getting a lot of benefit from traditional psychology and psychiatry. So I went off, I did LSD, ayahuasca, MDMA, all this stuff, not to get high, but just to kind of, from a neuroscience perspective, because I have a degree in neuroscience, kind of figure out why these chemicals actually work to help with my anxiety. And I write about that in the book as well, because it really is important to see that I think what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years with psychotherapy is it's going to move more towards psychedelics. We're already doing ketamine assisted psychotherapy. And it's also going to move more to somatic therapy. Like where do you feel these energies in your body? And can you connect to those energies now consciously and see them as your younger self and use them as a conduit to access those unconscious programs that are really running your life behind the scenes and making you miserable?
Exactly. Oh my goodness. That's what the book is about, everybody. I mean, anything.
Yeah. So I got about 3 minutes left. Lisa, do you want to, is there something we want to wrap up with, or is there something we want to,
Let me.
if people want to find me, basically, yeah, if you want to find me, just Google the Anxiety MD, not the Anxiety Doctor, the Anxiety MD, and that's, you'll find my YouTube, my Instagram, my website, like everything is connected to the Anxiety MD. So, was there anything you wanted to wrap this big thing up with, Lisa? It's been awesome talking with you.
No, I think we said everything. You just wrapped it up just now, actually. No, prior to what you just
Okay.
said, where everyone can find you. I just once again want to thank you for the book, and just say congratulations again for being number 1 in all of the areas you're #1 in with the book. Say happy birthday again. I hope that we can sit and chat again
Thank you.
on another topic.
Sure.
And enjoy the rest of your day, and just thank you so much for being here. Everybody, I thank you for being here, and I'm of course going to share this video over and over again. If you have any thoughts or comments, make sure you #replay, and thank you for those who are sitting right here right now. And Dr. Russell and myself are signing off, and everybody make it an incredible rest of your day. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thanks, Lisa. Anytime.
Thank you.